Thank you guys for joining us. I'm Chris Clark with the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, and our state, like all of our neighboring states, have suffered tremendously over the last 6 days. Personally, I'm heartbroken by the loss of life, the impact to our small businesses, companies, to our natural ecosystems around the state. Over the last 6 days, we spent a lot of time talking to our members, talking to local chambers, our development authority partners, and talked to folks that have lost loved ones, folks that don't know that they can even make payroll. But no matter how much they're mourning right now, everyone we've talked to is hopeful, they're resilient, and I think that's the Georgia way. We talk about it a lot, but it's this unique mix of corporate citizenship, community stewardship, servant leadership. You know, it's a proven track record that we have in this state to come together, to work together. We did it during COVID. We saw it with Albany Strong after the hurricanes down there. We saw it in Noonan after the tornadoes. And we're seeing it every single day right now. I'll just give you a couple of examples of the Georgia way at work. I've talked to chamber execs who didn't have water, didn't have power at their own homes, but took the generators from their garages, drove it into town, set up shop so local businesses could come in and charge their phones so they could communicate with folks. I've talked to development authority directors that have gone house to house to take notes, driven 14, 15 miles out of town to get a cell signal to call all of those people's family and friends to let them know that they're okay. This is what's happening. I talked to a chamber president this morning who was leading his own personal food drive and driving it 3 hours across the state to deliver it to a community that was suffering. We continue to hear businesses that are giving away products, opening their doors, delivering, asking for ways to help over and over and over everywhere in this state. Particularly, I want to thank our linemen who've been on the front line in dangerous conditions over and over again to restore power, to help our hospitals, our telecom workers, our water and sewer professionals, all working around the clock. I also want to thank Governor Kemp. The whole state government, just as we saw during COVID, has been transparent. They've acted with a sense of urgency. The governor's been on the ground in every corner of the state since this storm hit and preparing even before. And I also want to thank our congressional delegation. There's not a lot in this world that brings us together right now with our polarization, but every member of our delegation signed the letters, worked with President Biden to get our emergency declaration cleared faster than we've ever seen it before. And I appreciate them, and I appreciate that Georgia way. Here at the Georgia Chamber, our role has been as it always is, to serve, convene, inform, educate, to take what's happening with you locally and sharing with other partners at the federal level, at the state level. You can go to our website. We continually update our resources there for small businesses. Today, we're hosting a series of these informative updates from elected leaders as well as from our utility partners around the state. We'll continue to do that as we move through the next few weeks. We'll continue to coordinate with our local chambers. We want you to know that we're here to equip, serve you in any way that you need. We're not going anywhere as the Georgia Chamber. We will be here as long as this recovery takes, and we'll build a better, stronger state as we go forward. That's the Chamber way. That's the Georgia way. I was reminded that during COVID, one of our friends said that, you know, in good times, people want their chambers of commerce, but during bad times, they need us. And we've seen over and over again around the state that our local chambers are needed now more than ever. And so, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for your resilience. And now let's get on with this series of discussions that we're going to have. We'll be posting these online on YouTube, on Facebook, on social media, sharing it with our radio friends around the state and with Georgia broadcasters. And so, first up, I appreciate Walter West, who is CEO of Electric Cities of Georgia, joining us to give us his insight and updates from our friends at ECG. Walter, thank you for being with us. We appreciate what your teams have done, what you've been doing out there. And as we get started, you know, maybe people aren't as familiar with that brand of ECG and Electric City. So why don't you tell us who you guys are and the service areas that you provide, and then we'll jump into the other details.
Great, Chris. And let me first of all say thank you for putting this broadcast together and getting this message out. This, as you know, this is, as you mentioned, this is a very devastating storm, kind of the worst what we're seeing possibly in U.S. history as it relates to just customers being without electricity. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for getting that message out. Electric Cities of Georgia, we have 52 municipalities in Georgia that resell power. So that's 52, mostly cities. They resell over $1 billion worth of electricity. So a lot of customers in that. ECG's role, so Electric Cities of Georgia, ECG, our role is we have subject matter experts that are uniquely capable to help out those municipalities in areas that are unique to reselling power for municipals. As it relates to this conversation, we have subject matter experts that train linemen throughout their entire course of their career, from starting as a groundman all the way through their progression to be senior lineman and foreman and that sort of thing. That puts us in a very unique situation to provide what we refer to as mutual aid. So when a storm comes into a community, you are either a utility that needs assistance, so needs additional linemen to provide getting power back restored, or if you're in an unaffected area, you have linemen that can provide resources. So ECG, for the sake of this conversation, helps communicate mutual aid for those cities.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that's a great overview. And a lot of your cities are literally along that line from Florida all the way up to Augusta that got the hardest part of the impact. Talk to me a little bit about which ones of those cities that you serve have really received the most extensive damage, and where are they right now in that power recovery, bringing the power back on?
Yeah, thank you. So just kind of a setup to talk about that. So one of the challenges with this being the worst hurricane in U.S. history, the storm was so wide. So when a storm is coming in, we obviously meet with all the professionals in the industry, and they were relaying to us that the width of this storm was so wide and so damaging. So what happens is when a storm's coming in, we all coordinate, and those utilities that are going to be affected, they hold on to their crews. So what that does is it extends the bandwidth of available crews. So 2 and 3 days before this storm hits, we're bringing in crews from as far away as Massachusetts, Indiana, Texas, Oklahoma. So we're bringing in crews in advance of the storm that far away. Those utilities are in the affected bandwidth are there. So when that storm did come into Georgia, it basically hit right at the middle of the southern part of the border for the state, and then went directly southeast or northeast rather, and it affected 11 of our cities across that southeast rather quadrant. We had some cities that were absolutely devastated. The substations in those hubs. So the center of the city is where the substations are that distribute power out. When the storm hit, some of those substations were taken out. Some of the larger transmission lines going into those substations were taken out. So we had several cities with zero power. What we have done is we've got, I think, 40 crews either locally or across and outside the state helping out those cities. At present, we have of those 11 cities, 9 of them have either 90% restored or close to that. There's 2 or 3 of them that are still 20% restored, maybe as much as 50% restored. So working together to help restore that power to those cities.
So I think you make an interesting point. I think we see the pole down the street, and we think that's where the power comes from in these cities, right? But really, you guys have to start at the substation, the transmission lines coming in to the community. And so you can't even think about a pole until you make sure that the transmission's coming in and it's connecting to the substation, right?
That's a great point, Chris. And with the severity of this storm, it's there's been so much damage. What these linemen are having to do is not repair poles, but rebuild entire systems. So, and I can't stress enough safety. These line workers, everybody's under stress during this situation. You've got families that don't have power. They may have small children, and you can imagine kind of what they're going through, and our hearts go out to them. You've got line workers that are out rebuilding lines, and they may not even have power to their own homes, right? So in those situations, it's a mess. We've got people there trying to assess the damage so they can bring in the correct equipment to rebuild the correct the correct supplies to rebuild. As they're rebuilding, you have sections of line that you can actually get energized. So you have all this coordination. If you've got all these crews in, you want to make sure you're not energizing lines where somebody's still working. So we stress safety, safety, safety to get this work done.
Walter, when you look at those communities that are still, as we talk about, devastated, only 20–30% power back on, you guys have moved much faster than I think any of us thought possible. I remember when this thing first hit, I talked to some officials with ECG that said this could be weeks and weeks, and instead it took a matter of days for my parents to come back online. Are we talking about another week? Are we talking about 2 weeks? Or is there any way to even tell right now with those cities that you cover?
Yeah, for the cities, it won't be so bad. So the cities they have a very unique footprint. So our friends that are with the co-ops and IOUs, they have a little bit of a different structure. So when you refer to a city, their service territory is pretty dense. So we may have 3 or 4 customers between one section of pole. When you get outside these communities in this rural area, they may have 5, 6, 7 poles they have to restore just to get one customer energized. So our uniqueness is when we talk about us and our cities being re-energized, it may be the end of next week before some of these last ones get energized. Some of these rural areas, they're telling me, and you'll probably hear more from our friends in the industry, that the co-ops and Georgia Power are going to be much longer because of the terrain and what they have to do to get those customers in the more rural area energized. So that's kind of the difference here. So when you hear us talk about the cities, that's a little bit different than what you may hear from other guests on this broadcast that you have.
I appreciate it, Walter. One last question for you. For those folks that are out there that are watching this still on their cell phones, don't have power restored, or for those folks that do and are kind of rebuilding their communities, how can they help? Anything that we can do for electric cities, for the linemen that are out there? What advice would you have for folks?
Yeah, I would say, patience is the most important thing. I know people get frustrated. We all get frustrated. It doesn't make it go any faster. We've got, as we mentioned, safety is so important. And just to give you kind of one glimpse into the unique stories, you told one of our hardest hit cities was Douglas, Georgia. They were calling me. They have crews in from all over other states, and they're working, and most of the community was out of power, right? And I get a phone call saying, can you please help us find laundry service? We've got linemen that have been working you bring 4 days worth of clothes and now you're on day 6. And can you just help us get laundry service? So they work 16 hours a day. That's the max they're allowed to work for safety reasons. So we're trying to help coordinate those sort of things. So it's a compliment to everybody supporting, the effort, not just the linemen, but the others as well. So I just stress patience. I stress the fact that this is rebuilding, not just putting up a pole and trying to get power. So I really appreciate what you and your team is doing to get this message out. So thank you so much for doing this, Chris, and thank you to the chamber.
Well, thank you, Walter. We'll continue to pray for the linemen and all of your teams and all of our folks out there working on the front lines. We appreciate what you do. Thanks for being with us for this first session. Join us throughout the day for more of these. Thank you, and God bless.